alpha corrections, question C. With question C, we go back to a personal income tax rate level of 20% or 0.2, and we assume that, if you remember, originally G1 is 100, so we're going to assume that government spending went from G1 to a G2 level of 200. So we have an increase in government spending. This would be considered to be expansionary fiscal policy. All right, so before we do the calculations, let's try it conceptually, all right? So we have an increase in government spending. So if we have an increase in government spending, the questions are what's going to happen to GDP, disposable income, consumption, and the budget surplus. All right, let's see. First with GDP, because this is the closest relationship, G and GDP. Well, this would indicate that GDP would go up, all right? So that's our conceptual conclusion. Our calculations should show that GDP goes up. So basically, we're going to be comparing question C, which this is, with question A. All right. What do we expect YD to be doing? Well, YD will probably go up because of the following. You remember, YD is equal to Y minus TY. So what we have here is an increase in GDP, right? And we have a personal income tax rate which is at 20%. So my take on it is that disposable income will probably go up. And when it comes to consumption, here, total consumption, autonomous will not change, MPC does not change, but since YD changes, since YD increases, right, the speculation is YD will increase. If YD increases, then our hunch is that total consumption will also go up. And when it comes to the budget surplus, well, we'll find out. So we are to consider an economy described by the following equations, and the only thing that is different from question B is the personal income tax rate went from 40 to 20%, which is the original personal income tax rate, and the change here, that's what we're going to be concentrating on, is the increase in GDP, in government spending. In other words, the government here is practicing expansionary fiscal policy, and we want to figure out how this will change GDP, disposable income, consumption, total consumption, and also government finances. Calculate Y. So here you remember we have the model equation, right? Autonomous C plus autonomous I plus autonomous G plus autonomous X, and 1 minus MPC plus MPC times T. Nothing changes in the denominator. What will change, the change the change in, whoops, let's go back to red. Yeah, the change is right here. It's government spending, or autonomous government spending, that will go up from its original G1 level of 100 to its G2 level of 200. So the change is right here. It's autonomous government spending, which will increase. By how much? By 100. So in the model equation, the numerator is no longer 800. It is now 900. And the denominator, the 1 minus NPC plus NPC times T, remains at 0.36. Again, what I'm doing is I'm comparing question A with this question, which is question C. All right, so if we do the calculations, GDP is now 2,500. So whereas Y1 was originally 2222.22, Y2 is now 2,500. So indeed, expansionary fiscal policy does increase GDP. Calculate disposable income. So once again, disposable income is Y minus TY. All right. So Y here is 2,500 minus 0.2 times 2,500. So our answer is a disposable income level of 2,000. So comparing it to the question A, indeed, government expansionary fiscal policy does increase disposable income. You remember in question A, disposable income was 1,777.78. That was the YD1 level, and this is our YD2 level. So an increase in government spending from 100 to 200 does indeed push up the disposable income level of the households. Calculate the new C. Initially, in question A, the total consumption level was equal to 1,722.22. Yeah. And what we're going to do now is calculate the new level. All right. And we've already predicted that probably consumption will increase. That's because disposable income increased. That's because government spending has pushed up the national income level. All right. So once again, what is the equation for total consumption? Autonomous consumption plus NPC times YD. So the autonomous level is right here, 300 plus NPC, there it is, 0.8 multiplied by disposable income, which we've calculated to be 2,000. So for total consumption, our calculation shows 1,900 million or billion dollars. It doesn't matter. All right. So 1,900. So what happens when the government engages in expansionary fiscal policy by utilizing government spending. Consumption does indeed increase. And now for the calculation of the budget surplus. Budget surplus 2. Again, we're comparing it to question A. Let me just reiterate that the first budget surplus was equal to what? Was equal to $515.38 billion. All right. So let's see if the budget surplus has increased or decreased given this increase in government spending by 100. So once again, what's the equation? It's T times Y minus G. And the calculations would show that the budget surplus is 300. So there's a decrease in the budget surplus. Why is that so? Well, because the increase in government spending, yeah, from 100 to $200 billion is greater than the increase in the GDP level. That's the reason for the decrease in the budget surplus. And once again, we come to the fun part. Goods and services market diagram. So the question is, how do we draw the this change in government spending? Change government spending by 100. Yeah, government spending went from being $100 billion to being $200 billion. So once again, at the first level, government spending was 100, and now government spending is $200 billion. So the question is, how do we represent this change in government spending? So here we have the diagram. On the y-axis again, aggregate expenditures. On the x-axis, GDP. The formidable 45-degree helpline. All right. And we label this as aggregate expenditures are equal to national income. Once again, it's 8 o'clock and they're clapping in Paris. So once again, this 45-degree helpline represents equilibrium points, meaning at any one of these points, aggregate expenditures are equal to national income. That's just like saying demand from the aggregate expenditure side is equal to the supply side, meaning the GDP side. All right. So now we start with the first aggregate expenditure curve, AE curve 1. And you remember what's inside that aggregate expenditure curve 1 is a level of government spending, G, which is 100. All right, so let's relabel it. You remember autonomous aggregate expenditures 1. We're at 800, and this was the equilibrium point, E1, which meant that this was the total aggregate expenditure level of how much? Let's go back. 2222.22. Funny number. and that the GDP level, Y1, was at what level? Let's call it Y1, 2222.22. Another funny number. All right, so that's what equilibrium means. Aggregate expenditures 1 are equal to GDP, or Y1, well, at the same level. All right. So now, how do we graph this change in government spending from 100 to $200 billion? All right, let me change colors. Let me use blue here. Blue, blue, blue. All right. So, will it be a shift up or a shift down of the aggregate expenditure curve? It's going to be a shift up. All right. So where do we start? We start right here. All right. Why do we start here? Because we have a higher level of autonomous aggregate expenditures, which are no longer at 800, they are now at 900. This is due to the fact that government spending is autonomous. All right. So we start there, and again, it's a parallel shift. It'll be like this, a parallel shift, and we will label this as aggregate expenditure curve 2. All right. So here we would have the new equilibrium, right? Right. Whoops. Get out of here. Here will be the new equilibrium. Let's label it as E2, which would mean that this is the new level of aggregate expenditures 2. And so what are aggregate expenditures 2? They are 2,500. And what is the level of GDP, which we will label as Y2? It is at 2,500. So, increase in GDP and an increase in aggregate expenditures, which were originally 2,222.2 and are now at 2,500. All right. So again, I guess we have a conclusion here, and the conclusion, quite simply, is the following: whenever you have a shift, whenever you have a change in any one of the autonomous factors, like autonomous consumption, autonomous government spending, autonomous investments, or autonomous net exports, then it will be a parallel shift of the aggregate expenditure curve. However, if, I'm going to go to green, however, if there is ever a change in MPC or T or some of the other factors, then it will not be a parallel shift of the AE curve. It's going to be a non-parallel shift of the AE curve. All right, hopefully you remember that.